Let's have a go at an illustration that I think will give you an idea of what two-point perspective is based on. Two-point perspective is useful to us to draw buildings such as we're going to do today. Let's start with those 2 points, putting them in the middle of the paper. This line, I'm drawing very lightly, represents our horizon. And all right, say we're looking at the building. Let's draw. We won't put it exactly in the middle, we'll put it a little to the right side. A vertical line straight through the horizon. Make this a little darker so you can see it better. Good. Let's connect these lines. We're going to go from the top to this point here. Don't worry about perfection. It's just an exercise. Let's go from this line to this line. Let's go from this line to this line. You notice I kind of state this line a few times. I'm trying to sort of lightly state the line, and then when I start to feel comfortable with the movement, I bear down on the pencil a little more. One thing that's helping me a little bit is I'm standing, so I can move my arm freely. So let's imagine the ends of our box, which is essentially what we're drawing, is a three-dimensional box that's on lines of perspective. And this is basically what the house will look like, which is based on a box. So I'm drawing the far edge and the near edge of the house. You can see there's less space between this line and more space. Imagine this is the long side of the house. Then we connect these lines. We could use a ruler, of course. Excuse me. We could use a ruler, of course, but this is good training. Same to the other side. So these points that we started with are two vanishing points. They're presumed points. They're never quite visible. They're somewhere off on the periphery, and we use those as a reference, obviously, to connect lines and create some feeling of perspective or depth or 3 dimensions. So we have all these lines here. Where these lines intersect, probably about here, we can draw another line. It's probably closer to here, actually. A little correction. Then we can erase lines which we don't need. Oh, we don't need this one. We don't need the horizon anymore. Almost all the lines that we spent time creating, we don't really need them at this point because everything that we need to illustrate our form is there. You'll see it come out in just a second. These lines obviously go beyond the edge of our house. We don't truly need them. Though they could be helpful if we're creating like a street or where there's repeated houses on either side. And there we have it. This is a convincing three-dimensional rectangle. And you can imagine if we say we wanted to put on some windows or a door. Let's redraw this point. Let's redraw this point. And our windows, this is the topmost edge of the window. And this is the bottommost edge of the window. We draw the lines to our vanishing point. Say we want a door, and our door's height is about here. It's our vanishing point over here. Connect. And say our door is inset a little bit, so it's right about here. We'll just connect these by verticals. Our windows too are inset a little bit. We'll just draw 2 for the point of illustration. So we placed some rectangles on this, basically on the surface of our facade. Let's erase this again. And we can erase this line. We can, well, we can leave that line, doesn't really matter. Let's erase this line here, these lines here on either side of the window, even between the windows. Let's erase them for the moment so we can get the full effect. And then I'll just darken the shapes so we can see that these lines indeed follow the sort of structure of the rectangle that we created. Here's our doorway. Very simple house, isn't it? But I think you get the idea of how those vanishing points are helpful to create this three-dimensional quality. Certainly if we're architects or engineers rendering this, we have guidance as to where to put those vanishing points. Here I put them within the paper, where most of the time in reality they're way far away. These lines are very steep. It's almost like we're standing right in front of this corner here looking at our house. So there's almost a fisheye effect. But we'll see how we can use this principle in the drawing that we do next. Okay. Test, test. 1, 2, 3. So we're starting on a blank piece of paper, and I'm using a little harder pencil to get started until I like the layout, and then we'll proceed. So I'm drawing the sort of ground level here of the building. And the building's a little elevated and a little far away, so the perspective works in the same principle, but it's a little different presentation. Actually, I'm going to make a little border too on my paper just to keep it simple. Good. My ground is on a slight incline. This is what you'll find when working in the field. It's never perfect or never ideal. There's always little changes and little nuances that can drive us crazy. So typically when we're doing a house as a major subject, the 3/4 view is preferable. And that's what we're doing today, where we're actually looking much like we did in our exercise. We're seeing the front edge come towards us, and then we see one side of the building and we see another side of the building. This is 3/4 view, and actually portrait artists and house portrait artists favor this view because it's simply more interesting. Now what I want to do is sort of give myself a feeling of the height of the building. And I'm going to make a little line here for the height of the building, because this is made up of 3 different buildings. And so just putting a couple lines there helps me get started. Now, my vanishing points are way out here for one and off the paper to the right for the other. So we can't really include them in our subject, but we're going to use the same principle, and I think that'll be clear to you as we start to create the building. So another thing that helps me is to establish the verticals, which would be the peak of each roof. Where is the highest point, and then how far away is that peak from the next peak. This peak is slightly higher than this peak. So 3 different buildings. I just love this building, and it's a complex building, but okay, so let's look at our squares here. So we have the pitch of the roof, and if I draw an imaginary line, that's going way out to some vanishing point, and the base is rising to that vanishing point. These lines are sort of guesstimated. And this is what I mean by painter's perspective. We do think about those lines and how they influence the layout of the architecture, but we don't really use them in the same way that an architect or a engineer would. So we have a little line here for our window. Another line for our lower windows. Maybe just a little early for this detail, but so this is the facade of one building. Sort of has that classic barn architecture. This is just a little more inset. Okay. Good. Roof lines will slowly descend to a vanishing point that's way out here. This one will more steeply descend. This one even more steep. When I'm in the field, I am not drawing all these lines. I am just eyeballing it, but I think it's good practice in our exercise today to put them in so that we get a feel for exactly what it is we're trying to do. And then this peak of the roof about here. Let's draw this line here. This is a little bit parallel. I don't know what this is, but it's interesting, isn't it? This roof line. And there's this big saggy part of it. And we have the next peak back here, a little lower. Coming down. Descending to that same vanishing point. And we've got our major shapes in. I hope this idea of rising to a vanishing point, kind of flat through here, descending to a vanishing point, another vanishing point. I think that's clear. It's a little confusing. That's, to be expected. It's a new idea. And if you're not familiar with perspective, it can be a little debilitating at first. But with repetition, like everything else, we have a little slope here of stairs. Let's put on our chimney. It's kind of one of the major parts of this building. Also on perspective. See that there's that 2-point perspective again. They're moving towards the same vanishing points. And that's the outline edges of our house. From here we're going to add trees in the background, more trees, feeling of drifting snow. We've got some windows on the front here. There's a little kind of garage door here. We'll put that in. This is the corner, same as this. This is the corner here. Another window, another window, another window. So another thing that happens in perspective, which is a little harder to calculate, is as these move away, they all are following the lines of perspective, and they're getting more narrow, skinnier. We see less and less of them. Again, for painters, for artists, we can eyeball that. I am sure there's a mathematical way to calculate that, and there's tools that will help you to place that with certainty. But we're training our eye, and when we start to use those tools and those methods, we turn off our imagination, and we don't want to do that. We want to be able to tap into our imagination at any point for the purpose of exaggerating or making something more interesting. There's a really striking chimney back here. So this is the basic layout, and it feels like it's going from far away to coming close to us. We have a 3/4 view. We have a bit of slope that the whole building is on, a little bit of a rise. And we have that character. I think maybe that's even perhaps the most important part, is we have the character of this should be lining up a little better. The character of our roof, which is just probably no other roof in the world looks exactly like this one. And we like that about the building. At least I like that about the building. It's very unique, and it's got a story. You can see on the bricks, 1636, that's when this was built. It's a historic property now, of course. It's probably the oldest wooden structure in North America. And these sort of interesting variations from typical architecture make it just more enjoyable, more interesting to us. Okay, so the next thing to get into is plotting some of the trees. I'm going to indicate the canopy, anything else that's going on here, some of the branches coming out. This is coming out from behind the house, and there's a big bunch of trees over here, which will be easy for us to render. There's also a house in the distance which follows not the lines of perspective that we're using here, but it's on a different level and on a different pitch. So as a juxtaposition, it's nice to put that in. It's just a suggestion back there. We don't have to do much with that. The snow is kind of riding up. We'll exaggerate that. And we'll start to render this. I don't think I have to erase any lines. I think they're all going to blend in to the architecture, maybe through the snow-covered area. I'll do that towards the end. All right, let's start to shade. And we can use lines that follow the boards, or we can use a vertical line. Perhaps since it's got some snow to it, we can shade in this manner, using the flat side of the pencil. Just start to build up. In this way, we also emphasize those angles of perspective. The light is not strong in this setting. It's overcast, which means a lot of our tones are going to be flat tones. And I'm starting to see a little pattern here that I like, and will probably build up on all the way to the end of the drawing. Another good thing about these old houses, if you make a mistake, you can blame it on the architect. It's their fault, it's not your fault. Okay. We'll just build up the trees using the flat side of the pencil, sort of a kind of smooth angled stroke. I am thinking about the canopy of trees. these sort of emphasized marks, a little bit of that perspective comes out a little more. So the knowledge is helpful. It's not something that we're really working hard to exact, but knowing that we need to do some of that, and where may be a good place to show a few ideas of the perspective is really helpful. See all these little lines, they all have a little bit of that perspective. Very flat tone through here. Bring that down a little more. That's a little better. Well, the angle doesn't have to be perfect, but it's giving me a little bit of stress, so I'm going to try and make it somewhat more accurate. Angles make a big difference. Pretty close. I'm going to shade this kind of straight down. Complaining a lot today. Okay, our house is starting to appear in its entirety as a whole structure. Now I'm going to start to add the foliage back here. Very flat. There is a roof running back here, a little bit of a roof, but mostly trees, many trees. Just a little bit of a rise through here. We'll finish off that part of the branches a little later. Going right off the top of the paper. Let's build it up a little more. Pencil is very time consuming. Might have to be patient. Eventually it will come out. And will look good. Where I want a little more polished technique, I'll kind of blend the graphite a little bit with the rolling stroke. If I want some very strong darks. Winter trees, a lot of fun to draw. Okay. Well, we making some progress. Just takes a while. We're not going anywhere. Nice quiet winter's night. Today's the 1st of March, but it still feels like winter outside. This is really a line that's not within the perspective. This is what we call freeform. In this particular house is interesting because of these freeform lines. I don't really know if it's called freeform or not, but we'll use that term for the moment. Well, if you enjoy this sort of work with architecture, there is a profession for you. Many people like to have their house portrait painted. Well, you live in a house for, several generations. It starts to have the same attachment as any family member. So I think I will take my work and approach the Fairbanks family, see if they want a portrait of this house. I haven't seen too many paintings of it. In fact, I've seen a lot of historical photography of the house, but not so much painting. So I might have the market cornered. Probably not, but And we continue building, building, building. This is all distant trees, so I'm using this big flat stroke. We'll find a few patterns back here, but we don't want to compete too much with the house right now. Some steps covered with snow. I think this leads down to a garage, carriage house or something like that. All right, so we'll do a couple more things, clean it up. And set it aside for a day or so and ask ourselves, do we want to do any more to this? If so, what do we need to do? What do we need to add? Go over some of our strongest darks in the forward part of the house here. Oh, now this pencil is failing me. Might be the fault of the sharpener. Anyway, I've got plenty around. Using the 6B for most of this. painter's perspective. All we need to do is be close. The windows are the eyes. Putting on a little mascara. I'm remembering there's a profession that doesn't really exist much anymore, called an architectural renderer. And this is maybe 60 years ago, 50 years ago. My parents had their house built, but before they committed to it, an artist, watercolorist, produced a painting of what it would look like, fully landscaped, painted, sort of a concept of so that they could see and eventually buy it. But that was a critical part of selling the house. I'm going to get my kneaded eraser. Take a break. And we're putting on some of the final touches, making this just a little darker to make it stand out for no other reason. It's really not a lot darker, but it's sort of at a good place to bring it out. It's against the sky there. A little bit of a flue, I guess. Oh, this is to prevent critters from accessing. I don't think they use that fireplace anymore. Then, let's just lift a little bit in the windows, make it a little more dramatic, a little more contrast there. This one got smaller, but it's okay. No one's going to know. Even the Fairbanks, they wouldn't know. I think I want to put on a sort of general background tone. To set off the snow, the brightness of the snow on the rooftops. I can see it in the photograph. I think in nature too it would be a little more pronounced than it is now. That means taking the broad side of the pencil, and I'm just going to use a vertical, very light. conveys that sort of overcast light that we have today. And even in this corner, it's a nice compositional tool. It just happens to be here. Kind of frames our image nicely. Just a few branches coming in from the upper left. Let's clean this part up. Feels like snow is drifting up against the side of the house. That's what I was hoping to accomplish. But we want to do some stuff in the foreground. Not a lot. I'm just going to put a few dried grasses, I think. Yeah, something like that. Just adding some details and trying to get the contrast to really make this front part feel solid. Basically there. Step back a little. Oh well. I think I better leave it alone. Yes, let's leave it alone. Okay. So that's basically the exercise, is creating a building with character, a house with character, thinking a little bit about painter's perspective, going through the exercise at least. And then I believe that in nature you start to see those lines come out a little more, the lines of perspective that we are working with in the drill. It's imaginary lines, and like I said, we don't need to get them exact, but we should be aware of the principle and how they can help us to communicate some feeling of depth to our scene, also some believability. If our perspective is way off, it looks odd and it distracts from seeing, the beauty of the building. So this was an interesting case because the perspective is off in the building because this was built so long ago. It's sagging and it's a little deformed. That gives it a character that I like. Just want to keep it a little softer back here, a little lighter. Maybe make the chimney a little darker. All right. These branches probably I should state again. Close enough.